Hi, my name is Jerry Wise, and I'm a therapist at Family Tree Counseling Associates in Carmel, Indiana. And this video is entitled Overcoming Your Allergy to Intimacy. It's a video about exploring and identifying fear of intimacy or allergy to intimacy, and discussing a few basic ways to begin to overcome that fear and to begin to increase intimacy in relationships with people who matter to us. First of all, I want to suggest that you go to a blog. My blog is listed on the website www.familytreecounseling.com, and you can go to my name, Jerry Wise, as one of the associates, or on the front page there's also a link where you can find my blog, and I discuss the topic of allergy to intimacy. Most all of us experience, to some degree or another, fear of intimacy or an allergy to intimacy. Not all of us experience the allergy to intimacy in such a way that it is a crisis or at a crisis level, but I think we all experience intimacy issues to some degree or another. We're all imperfect. None of us had a perfect childhood. None of us have had a perfect adulthood. So we have some struggles with relationships. We've all been hurt. We've all been confused. We've all been struggled in relationships that have mattered to us. And as a result of that, we can have some fears regarding being vulnerable or being open to other people. One of the top complaints that I find when people come in to see me, couples particularly when they come in, they state, we don't communicate anymore. We have communication issues. They might say, all we do is fight and argue. That's all we do anymore. We communicate in negative ways, such as we fight, we argue, we withdraw, we distort, we jump to conclusions, we accuse. We might even withdraw or pout, or we just are not anywhere close to being vulnerable or open with one another. And the pattern of communication we have now just does not allow that. And so we are very unhappy with our relationship, and we want to change that. Marriages become a very toxic or painful place for vulnerability or being known or sharing any feelings or beliefs. Marriage can be a very, very painful place to be yourself because it matters. The relationship is highly charged. We might have a lot of expectations about our marriage or our relationship. And we've also had experiences that might be negative within our marriage or our relationship. And so it becomes a very complicated place to share on an intimate basis because the ante is up so high on that relationship. And it really has a lot to do with the basic sense of who we are and our spouse's basic sense of who they are. Let me talk about Derek and Helen. After their first couple of years of marriage, they did pretty well and were sharing themselves with each other because they were kind of in what I would call the romantic phase of marriage. We kind of idealize the other spouse. We see them in very positive ways. We kind of ignore or don't look at their negative traits, or we're in denial about negative things about them. And so we see it as a very rosy kind of relationship. We feel more safe to share ourselves. So that early romantic period, we might have sharing that goes on that feels very intimate and close. And then, as another video that I've shared called Falling Out of Love and Into Reality, we find ourselves now no longer in that romantic phase, and now it's in much more of a prickly phase. And there's more tension, there's more frustration, maybe even anger that has occurred. We at least now see the other person in a far more realistic way. In fact, we may even tend to start seeing them in a pretty negative way. Oftentimes in a marriage, the very things that attract us to another person about them become the things that we end up disliking about them in the long run. And that's an interesting dynamic. And it can be explained in a very family systems way. And that's for another video. We can talk about that. So Derek and Helen have this relationship. Helen's resentful that she doesn't feel special. They don't share themselves anymore. Derek has kind of moved into kind of an oblivious phase. He's kind of distant, doesn't really care. He's pretty frustrated that they don't have sex anymore and don't feel close because they don't have that physical intimacy between them. Also, Derek and Helen have competing views of intimacy, which they haven't talked about. They're not aware that they have different views of what intimacy should be like. They also have views that come from their family of origin in which they brought with them to the marriage about how intimacy should happen within a marriage, which they probably have not talked about or identified. And this causes great frustration and difficulty for couples. Let me start out by answering the question, what is intimacy? And I think that's a very important question and needs to be answered. What is my view of intimacy? I like this definition. Intimacy is the voluntary sharing or voluntarily sharing and connecting using your emotional and physical self while maintaining a healthy sense of self. So it's being connected while being yourself. And both sides of that equation are very important. Reaching out, connecting with someone else while maintaining a real solid sense of who you are. Now that may sound very simple, but actually it can be rather a real challenge to maintain that and to do that. And I think might take a while to learn how to do that well. Because often we do not have a very solid sense of self. It's very fluid. It may be very mysterious. We may know very little about ourselves. And that which makes it very hard to reach out and connect with someone else because ourselves is not very solid or secure. Here's an important fact that you can hear from this marital and family therapist. A very important fact. The intimacy you are experiencing now is the true level of intimacy you can handle. The intimacy you are experiencing is the true level of intimacy you can handle right now. Now, that may not be good news to you. You may think, oh, no, I don't believe that. I want a lot more intimacy in my relationship. I want a lot more intimacy in my marriage. Well, you might, and there's nothing wrong with wanting a lot more in your marriage and in your relationship. What I don't think couples realize enough is that they're not ready for that. They just believe they are. I'd like to try to insert a graph or a graphic right now in the video, and I hope it comes on. If it doesn't, I just want to talk to you about, if you can't see it, I want to talk to you about a graphic in which there are two vertical bars that go up and down, two side by side like a railroad track, and on one side there's a level and it's marked a 2. And that's on the right side. On the left side, there's a mark at the higher point on it, and it's a 7. And the left side would be labeled the level of intimacy, and the right side would be labeled self-esteem and self-awareness. Oftentimes, and what is most common, couples have life self-awareness and self-esteem that is at a 2 on, say, a 10 scale, but they expect intimacy at a 7 or on the 7 scale. And I think that really causes lots of difficulties because they expect so much, but they're not able to maintain or sustain it at this point. So they have an allergy to that intimacy. If that 7 intimacy actually happened, it would scare them to death. They couldn't even maintain it or sustain it. And they are not aware of that. In other words, we are having the intimacy that we can handle right now. Even if we don't like that level, that's what we can handle. Now, that sounds like bad news. Actually, it's good news. The good news is if I can come to accept that, I can begin to see, well, why do I tolerate only the level of intimacy I have right now? What is in the way of allowing me to tolerate a lot more intimacy? And I think that's the key to understanding how we can improve our level of intimacy. Because how to change or improve that level of intimacy starts with understanding how intimacy works. And I think couples have a misunderstanding of intimacy, and just like I say, they have a misunderstanding of the level of intimacy they can actually handle or tolerate, and have a lack of knowledge about how low they might be on their self-esteem, self-awareness scale. They sometimes think they're a 7, and so therefore should be operating at a 7 level of intimacy, when actually they may be a 2 and have this belief that they should be experiencing a level at a 7, but their intimacy level experience is actually a 2. It's pretty unsatisfying. But that is where they are. If we can believe and remove some of our illusions and realize that's the level I can tolerate, now how can I begin to tolerate more? And that takes some changes in our level of self-awareness and our level of self-esteem. So, and again, the problem that I see commonly is this railroad track problem of a 2 experiencing and really being a 2, but expecting a 7. And that's expecting health while being unhealthy. And it's that mismatch of awareness. Again, why don't I have this wonderful intimacy with my husband? Why don't we have this, or with my wife? Why do we have this 7? Why don't we have this 7 going on? Well, it must be something that we're not doing. Or it must be something my spouse is not doing. So I'm very unhappy that I'm not experiencing a 7 in my intimacy. So I need to move on and find a new spouse and a new relationship. Because if I only have that new relationship, then I can experience a relationship to a 7. Let me stop here, and I want you to think about those things. There is a part 2 to this video that you can find in the next video, and I hope you'll join me then. This is Jerry Wise, and you can find me at www.familytreecounseling.com. And we'll see you back here in just a minute.